And people can continue to join us, but hello and thank you for joining us this afternoon, or if you're in the time zone like Amanda, good morning. My name is Liza Lowe and I'm affiliate faculty at Antioch University here in New Hampshire. And I'm the director of Inside Outside, which is a professional network for educators who are using nature and place-based education to work with their students. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. Let us know who you are, where you're joining from, the ages of the children you work with, and maybe one exciting, outstanding thing that's happened to you so far today. And Heather, do you mind advancing to the next slide? We are grateful for the generous support of the George B. Storer Foundation, which helps us provide events such as these free to you. And other resources on our website, on the Inside Outside website. We try to offer a lot for free, so it's accessible to everyone. Next slide, Heather, if you don't mind. And I'll plug some links in the chat box so you can find your way to our website if you haven't already. You'll see that we have a calendar that has all sorts of upcoming events happening, especially over the next 2 months. We have a couple other webinars and some in-person events and then local chapter meetings. And we have a YouTube channel where you'll be able to find the recording of this video. And maybe there's one more slide. Oh, and just I hope that you'll join Inside Outside. It's free, and there are a lot of resources and opportunities for connecting with other educators. So I want to thank Amanda and Heather for joining us today and sharing with you all different ways and ideas for how to use the Environmental Kinship Guide with the children you work with. Thanks so much, Amanda and Heather.
Thank you so much for having us. And welcome to everyone who's in the room. Amanda and I are so pleased to be with you today, and honored to hear your stories and talk a little bit about our journeys, reflect on our journeys as we learn with children in nature, with nature, about nature. And so thank you. Thank you for being here today on this autumn trip through the Environmental Kinship Guide. And thank you for all you do for children on a daily basis. Thank you for taking good care of yourselves. So I thought we might start with a look at my backyard. This isn't actually a photo of my backyard, but these two flowers are in my backyard, and they're purple asters and yellow goldenrod. And this is what autumn in Nebraska looks like to me. You can also see from my room here that it's the light that comes into this room is so golden. Autumn is such a golden time. And Robin Wall Kimmerman speaks of this pairing, this purple-yellow pairing that happens in September in her part of the country as well, as lived reciprocity. It's wisdom. Okay, so the beauty in one is illuminated by the radiance of the other. The beauty of one is illuminated by the radiance of others, and those are her words. And what we hope today is that while we tell our stories and reflect on our journeys, that it also illuminates the beauty of your journey and what you've been doing with children. And as you use this Environmental Kinship Guide, we hope that that also is a way for you to highlight the incredible work that you're doing with children in classrooms throughout the country and throughout the world. Oh, let me also say, importantly, that let's take a moment to acknowledge those folks in my homeland that have lived here before, the Ponca, Omaha, Winnebago, Dakota, and Odo people, past and present, who cared for this earth, who lived here, and were stewards of the earth. And let us also work towards a better understanding of that stewardship and Indigenous people in and throughout the things that we do on a daily basis. So my name is Heather Fox, and I am one of the 6 authors of Environmental Kinship Guide. And we're here in this little bit of a collage, and I'm going to start with the left-hand corner in the snow. This is Megan Gessler. She's in Illinois. If you move down, you see Sheila Williams-Ridge, who's in Minnesota, and then myself in the middle there, Claire Warden in Scotland, and then Anne Mead in New Zealand, back around to Amanda, who's here with us today. She's here in her hiking gear and with us today. And so we all came together to create this guide, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But before we do, I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and Amanda will do the same. So I'm centered in Nebraska, but do work with teachers and families all across the country training. And my main role is outreach director for Nature Explore. And my specialty, or the things that I care about most in the world, are infants and toddlers, the beauty of the natural world, and connecting with people. How about you, Amanda?
Kia ora from New Zealand. So I work for a company called Story Park, which is an e-portfolio app for using to engaging families and children in their learning. And I've been teaching now for over 30 years in early childhood. So, and in that time, I've had lots of different roles, but definitely nature education and environmental education has always been a passion of mine. So it's been awesome to work with this fantastic group of women. And I think we all learn together as we've been creating this document. We've been working on the Environmental Kinship Guide for now, was it 3 years, Heather? I think we've been going backwards and forwards, and we thought it would just be so easy. We'd spend 6 months and it would be done, but it hasn't been like that. It's been a real journey for all of us, and it's just been such a inspiring space to be, and to working with these lovely ladies that, you know, we just can't help ourselves. We have to keep coming back and meeting together, and we even got to meet in person in July, which was really exciting. So after 3 years, we finally got to meet each other at the Leadership Institute Nature Conference. Yeah, so it's really great to be here today and to share our stories.
So as you hear, we all came together with this this joint understanding, or this notion, I think it was more, that deep relationships can exist amongst those of us who are part of nature. And don't forget that each and every one of us is part of nature. We are nature. And we're educators from many different countries, many different backgrounds, collaborated to work on this work, or on this particular concept. And you can see here, this is a knot. It was created in this way because all of this is overlapping. You can't really parse out one type of learning from another. But in order to study it, sometimes we do that. So you can see that kinship, this guide has been divided into learning about nature, learning in nature, learning with nature, and learning for nature. We'll talk more about each of those things. I imagine those of you that are working with children can see how dividing it into these ways would help, and might even notice as we go along how this guide could support you in your work, or help highlight the work that you're already doing. So the Kinship Guide is 21 pages. It's an educational tool designed to help marry an overarching nature-based pedagogy with everyday examples. It's our hope that by highlighting a myriad of practices from different places and cultures and communities, that the guide will be used by people far and wide, and help us to understand this lifelong positive relationship and commitment that we can have with the natural world. Here it is, kinship. Kinship is rooted in a deep kind of knowing. It includes but goes beyond cognitive understanding. Humans, like other living things, are social beings, and we live in relationship with each other, not just with other humans, but the entire natural world. Our evolutionary roots are in nature, and the rootedness is an essential part of our physical reality. But it's also an essential part of our emotional reality, our psychological reality, and even our spiritual reality. We are ecological beings, and kinship recognizes this reality as being significant to all humans. Sometimes it's hard for us to describe this in words. It is hard for me sometimes, but children instinctively know. Given the time and the place in nature, they can experience this incredible, intricate connection. And it sometimes starts with something like this. See Milo down there in the left-hand corner holding out something with an inquisitive look. I wonder what this could be. And Grayson and Braxton picking up a worm. Braxton picks it up and Grayson shrieks with delight. The toddlers then continue to explore worms in a toddler sort of way, pointing at them, looking for them wherever they go, and holding and playing with those little wiggly worms. So that's learning in nature, the opportunity to learn about yourself in the world, in the natural world. Those of us who are early childhood educators know a lot about early childhood in general, and we know that bubbles like this, the opportunity to explore bubbles, helps with fine motor skills, oral motor skills. They help calm and help children understand visual spatial skills. But how is learning in nature even more valuable than if we were indoors using bubbles? Well, this is Mabel. She is particularly enthralled with bubbles, and so much so that for her birthday, her mom brought some bubbles into school, and the children used them in their outdoor classroom. Six months later, notice the outfit change in the way the Nature Explorer classroom looks now. Mabel is still excited about bubbles, but she has more to discover. In fact, she sees one of those old bubble wands in one of the bushes, and she notices it's broken. But she really wants to use it. She knows what they're used for, and she starts to problem solve. Mabel takes a little piece of a little stick, places it in the bubble wand, the hole of the bubble wand, and begins to use it that way. Notice how when you're in the natural world, it opens up more kinds of learning. Now it's not just about the oral motor skills or the fine motor skills of popping the bubbles, but it's the problem solving with those open-ended, incredible materials that the tree next door just handed her. Learning in nature is valuable because it adds an extra dimension and an extra opportunity for exploration and communication of what you know and all the possibilities.
Right. Thank you, Heather. So now the EK guide, if you've read it, you might notice that it focuses on the learning for children. So we're not telling you how to do nature. It's up to you to decide, when you can see the ideas that we've got in there, how best it will work for you and your context. So in this photo here, in New Zealand, we have probably smaller groups of children generally. So this isn't where I used to work, and there's 30 children. And one thing in our context is our regulations state that we must provide children space inside and outside at the same time. So our door is always open. So the children can choose if they want to play inside or outside. And so that really does affect how we roster ourselves. So we need to make sure that there's always a teacher outside with the children, and what we provide out there with our outdoor classroom. So you need to think about your context and what it's going to be like for you, so that you will be able to enable what we've got in the nature, the EK guide. So the other thing with New Zealand is it's springtime here. So I'm coming from a very different space. I'm having to think back to autumn and fall and what we were doing then. So, and because in New Zealand it's pretty temperate, our temperatures don't change that much. So between summer and winter, especially where I'm living, we only change by about 10 degrees. We don't change a lot. So we can leave the door open in the middle of summer and it's not too hot. And we can leave it open in the middle of winter and it's not too cold. So this really does affect how we play outside, compared probably with you in America, where it gets really hot and it gets really cold in some places. So just thinking about your regulations, your context is going to affect how you are going to use the guide and your ideas about how you are going to implement the different spaces. So I just wanted to, so in New Zealand, whoops, I'll just go back. I'm just going to go back, Heather, just quickly. So in the outdoor spaces, there's maybe slightly different. We've got generally in most places in New Zealand, you would be finding large sand pits, water play. You can see the kind of a structure. Often they will be not fixed. They would be movable climbing equipment. You can see the swings that change daily. And you can see some really good cooperative play happening there, just with the wagon and the children kind of cooperating around there. There's a jumping mat there because you can see the garden in the middle and the children jump down onto that, just to give you an idea of how we work. And you can see there's a ramp and stairs going inside, so the children can just move between those two spaces. So that's us. Thank you, Heather. If you want to move on to the next slide. So just looking at some of the different things that we might be doing in the fall. So one of them is ephemeral art. And again, because there aren't many changes in the seasons, this is something that we can do a lot of. And the thing I love about ephemeral art, the first one is that we can go and collect the things in our outside areas and bring them inside. We can sort them and create. I find we can see here what kind of one-to-one correspondence going inside, and just the sorting of the different materials. And then we can take photos of that if the children want to keep what they're using, so we're not kind of sticking them to paper. They can be reused over and over, and then they can go back out into nature. The other great thing about ephemeral art is that you can actually just do it outside in the spaces that you're in. So on the right, we were at the beach, and this child, she just collected sticks and she made birthday cake, which is often something that we do here. And there were candles in the cake and she was blowing them out. And so just using what was in her environment and being able just to use the camera to document that and share that with her. So you might want to think about the different spaces that you might be able to do some collecting, especially with your autumn leaves. Where I am, we don't get a lot of autumn leaves because our trees are mainly evergreens. So just thinking about, again, our context affects how we use the spaces that we're in. So this one here, in the beach trip, we often go to the beach, and this is taking that whole ephemeral art a little bit further and thinking about how we can use that collaboratively. This is a collaborative creation that the children were making. It was kind of around an enclosure in a house sort of thing, but you can see that the children have used what was in the environment at the time, so lots of seaweed, driftwoods, and you can see stones and shells down the bottom, so everyone could contribute their piece in the way that meant something to them.
And Amanda, in New Hampshire, most of the folks on the camera here are from New Hampshire, and they have the most incredible fall with changing leaves. That's probably happening pretty soon. And they have pretty close access to the beach. So they've got it all. They've got it all.
Fantastic. You can see actually there's a child hiding in that creation too, just down the bottom there. And so you can see with the photos, I'm trying to, I suppose, link how this might fit with the EK guide to give you a bit of an idea as well. So this is just learning in nature. This is just one of the stories I wanted to share. This child, he brought in a bag of seed that I think they had found it and they hadn't used it, bird seed, and he wanted to give it to the birds. He's an incredibly empathetic wee man, and he was really interested in looking after our bird population. So we had a bird feeder, so we popped the bird feed in there, and we noticed that after it went down really fast, and we did wonder how that happened. And after a week or so, we noticed that there was all this greenery growing under where the bird feeder was. And so, we started to have those conversations about how that happened, where the seed had what had happened to the seed, and perhaps, the birds didn't actually get to eat it after all. So having these wonderful conversations, and you can see that he's brought other children into his interest as well. I should say too, in New Zealand, we have a national curriculum, and it's child-based kind of, and we're using an emergent curriculum here. So we base a lot of what we do on the children's interests and taking those further and working with them. So really supporting this child's wanting to look after the birds outside. So this week kind of had a talk about what we might be able to do differently. So this whole idea of problem solving as well, to support the birds and feeding them through the colder weather. So Heather, if you want to move us forward. So we thought about other ways that we could use the bird seed. And so we talked about making seed bells. And so we went and found a recipe on the internet, and there were more children involved in this. So the idea that, you can draw those other children in through these experiences. And so here he is, he's making lots of bird bells. And we tried different recipes at the same time. He also we tried different sized bird bells, and so this kind of went on for a lot longer, but I've summarized here. And then we got to see how they went back outside again. So here we want to go here. So we finally got to hang the seed bell back up in the tree for the birds to eat, which worked a lot better than just having the seed in that container. And so for me, this I really felt with this particular child, that whole idea about learning with nature, that he already had this relationship of empathy, and we were just really supporting that. And that whole idea of feedback loops, that he tried one thing but it didn't work, so we thought, well, how else can we look at this learning to support that trial and error that we really value, and that's what Heather's kind of talked about outside as well. So it's just one wee story, just thinking about just simple things that we can do with children. Right, Heather, your turn.
In thinking about learning with nature and those feedback loops, seasonal changes can allow us the opportunity to experience feedback loops as well, experiencing the same thing in different seasons over time. In fact, the Mabel story that I told earlier was an example of that as well. Beyond learning in nature, she was learning with nature. Here, children are in the fall, they are able to plant some of the winter crops. Kale and rainbow chard can go in both in spring and winter, and children can experience that caretaking even at this very young age. Does this age of child surprise any of you, that she is responsible for the care of these plants, or does it make you say, yep, I get it. This is how it is at my school too. I see some thumbs up. I see Johanna and Maria saying, yep, and Suzanne saying, yep, this is what we see too. And boy, our children really can be the caretakers of the natural world in many, many ways. And the cool thing about this pot is it's set right, see there's a fence right along the side. It's actually set on the outside of the toddler space. And I'm guessing they put it on the outside because toddlers are kind of prolific at picking things. And for some reason, the teachers wanted to protect these plants, but they figured out a way to lift up the gate enough so that they could put their hands through the gate and pick the kale and eat it back in the classroom. And it was pretty incredible. That's how important this plant was for them. And it grew much bigger than this. This is a spring planting time, but they're able to plant like this in the fall as well. And then in addition to being able to plant these materials, they also are documenting their own learning. This child here has been guided to think a little bit about what that was when they were planting and draw what she experienced. I wish we could see her drawing a little bit better, or maybe she had the language to describe it to us, but she is definitely telling us about her planting experience through documentation. And Amanda is going to talk a little bit more about how we document learning as educators, but children can also document their learning. And this is an example of learning with nature, defined as forming kinship with the natural world, exploring the holistic nature of experiences such as cause and effect, and repeating them regularly throughout the year. I'm going to play this video, and then I want you to put in the chat, what do you think they're preparing for? You don't need to hear it to know. Oh, looks like we're getting close. Anyone else want to guess? There's making a nest, a worm bin, winter insulation, or paper mache, compost, fire starting. Not this time, but we will talk about fire starting today together. This group of children, many of you are correct. They are working to create a worm bin, and this is part of their composting. On the screen, if you could hear it, the teacher talks about what the newspaper gives to the compost, and the children just diligently tear. Oops. The other thing that needed to happen as they were preparing for the worms is preparing food. And I love the concentration on his face as he works to get those strawberries cut for the worms. You can see that they're old strawberries, not strawberries that children would be eating because they're quite moldy. And it's such a sunny day in this. This is actually at the beginning of the worm bin prep, which was near the spring. And then this prep goes on throughout the year with children really becoming the experts. Now, I think it's funny because my worm bin friend says that the worms need it cut a little bit smaller in order for them to really get to gnaw on the food. But these children have figured out how to use just a plain old butter knife, table knife, I guess maybe you would call it, to saw the celery. And they do this sawing back and forth motion that Braden's showing you here on the right to prep the food for their worms. And you can see there's a lot of conversation and camaraderie and use of different tools. There is a mallet down there as an option, but they've all chosen the plain old table knife. And in this case, children are experiencing an opportunity to care for the natural world and develop kinship with those little worms. I wasn't able to get a real picture of one of our red wigglers, and maybe it's just better that way so you can imagine what they look like. But worm bins and compost are throughout the United States and beyond an important way that children are contributing to the care and the upkeep of their natural spaces and those creatures that live around them. Amanda, what about shadows?
Right. Well, autumn creates great shadows. The sun's a little bit lower in the sky and everybody has shadows. So I just wanted to share, this is just one project that we did around shadows, and getting the children to go out and explore their shadows. The tricky thing was we don't always get a lot of sun, and so you can sometimes have to pick your days about the days that you're going to go out and actually do this. So I've just, as I go, it's, I suppose, looking at the documentation that we did to try and understand what was going on in the children's minds about their understanding around shadows. And it must say it was a lot harder than I thought. And so we went out, and you can see we've got this child, Alex, she's lying on the child's shadows. So, she's really, getting in there and experiencing whole bodily what this shadow feels like. So lots of cooperative exploration around that. And then we went on, I'm going to go on to the next slide, Heather, about drawing what they know. And this was I found this really fascinating because drawing it, I suppose the difference between a shadow and a reflection. And so it took many visits to go and explore our shadows and what they were doing here. And so just getting them to draw their shadow really told me a lot about their thinking and understanding around how shadows worked. And so you can see here we've got a child, that the idea that their shadow is black, that they haven't got any detail, and so it's starting to understand the difference between themselves and their shadow. And then thinking about where the shadow is positioned and how it moves. So there was a whole lot of learning that really came out of just looking at these drawings. So I just found it really fascinating. So the next one, Heather. Oh, some have disappeared. I'm just wondering if they gone somewhere else or?
Here they are. Is this it?
Yes, there we go. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So in this particular child who was incredibly thoughtful and I must say artistic, and you can see here that I've just kind of got the whole thing here. He's gone out, he's explored. I just love how he said the shadows are bigger than anyone. This whole idea that it's so huge and long, and then you can see he's actually really thought about the positioning of the sun behind him. Here he is, and how the shadow starts from his feet. So you can see through, and I had a series of photos of how his drawings changed over time as he continued this exploration. So thinking about how children's drawings can really give us a look into their mind and their thinking. So thinking about getting children to get those pens and paper out there so that we can really start to see how those children are thinking. And then there's another one there that was through drawing.
Is it this one? Yes, it's this one.
No, that one, yeah. And so then again, writing down their words. So one child was, she was nearly at school. We go to school when we turn 5. And so she really liked to write. So I think I wrote this down for her and she copied it. But when you jump, your shadow jumps. It's like a real person with no eyes, no ears, and no nose. And then and then another child, you can see it's all about kind of emotions. At nighttime when we walk up the stairs, the shadows behind us, they're dark and they're scary because when you look inside, they're black. And when you go and upstairs and the lights turned off. So writing down those words really gives you an insight into what they're thinking as well. So just thinking about how you document those and share them with them. Okay, so now we'll go to this one. So
yeah, one of the things, Amanda, one of the things I was noticing is these first few experiences are pretty much experiences that folks would have in a more standard outdoor classroom or outdoor space, or they're concepts that you might have used even indoors with children. But this study here that happened is maybe a little bit beyond some of us, and it definitely couldn't happen indoors.
This one coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So another project that we worked on, and we called it Risky Play, and this was from the children's, mainly it was driven by the 4-year-old boys in our service who have a lot of energy. And we noticed that there was a lot going on in lots of different areas outside. So they had a fascination in monsters, and we had a lot of bikes outside, and they were wanting to build ramps, and the ramps were getting higher and more challenging. They were probably using words that we weren't particularly happy about, but again, that was another risk that they were taking. So we saw that they were taking these risks in a whole lot of areas. And then we noticed, I think this actually might be a slide before this one, Heather. I think that was above the other ones. It kind of got a little bit out of order. Just go back up.
That one?
Yeah, that one. Thank you. So we also noticed that they had a really big interest in fire. And so this started off as a dramatic play sort of thing, that they were making fires in their play. And we have carpentry with hammers and nails, and so they took a hold of the carpentry wood and they took it and putting it in the tires. And you can see this boy here was pretending to light the fire, perhaps they were matches or they were a flint. So you're getting to know by watching them a lot of their previous knowledge about fires. And so we started to have these conversations about what they knew about fires and what you put in them and where they were. And so a lot of the children had wood burners at home. Do you have wood burners in? I presume you've got wood. No? A lot of our heating is through wood burners, so it's an enclosed enclosed fireplace. It has a door that you put wood in, etc. And so they had a lot of knowledge of this, but I think from afar, it wasn't something that they had probably personally helped with. Probably the parents did it and they just watched. And so, you know, I encouraged this play, and then they said, "Oh, can we light a real fire?" And I could see from what they were building that there was probably very little chance that the fire was going to be lit. So it's like, yeah, this will be fine. I can cope with this. So I said, yeah, because we need to think about the safety and how we're going to do this. So we found a clearer space on our outside classroom that was just bare dirt. And we have lots of river boulders. So they went and got these and we made a circle around that to keep it safe, etc. And so there was a lot of conversation. This went over several days. And I was feeling okay with this because I thought, you know, it's probably not going to light. But then you can just go back to that next slide, Heather.
This one right here?
Yes. Another child came and joined them, and he just said, "You're doing it all wrong. This is how you need to do it." And suddenly I realized this child with a lot more knowledge, it was a really good chance that this fire was now going to be lit and it would burn. And so it was kind of, I had to make a decision then if I was going to shut this play down or if I was going to let it go. And because it was risky business, I knew this was a big interest for them. And previously, in the other occasions with a lot of the other work that we'd been doing with the children, we'd found that when we stood back and let the children keep going with their interest, that they actually took a lot more responsibility for the risks that were involved and that risk assessment rather than letting us do all the risk assessment. So I took a big deep breath and I stepped back and went with the play. I thought, well, you know, if it gets out of hand, I can, you know, there's still potential that I can intervene at points. And so this child, he got up and he said, you know, you need to make it like a triangle. And if you want to go to the next slide. And you need newspaper. So he went inside and he got the newspaper and he was putting it all in there. And then the other children got it. They were actually kind of not hyperventilating, but you know, they could really see that we were going to light this fire and we needed to be a lot safer. So they decided that they were going to be firefighters, and they went, and we have a lot of water spray bottles around, and so they decided they would get the water spray bottles. There was another child that said the Tower of London, they put the fire out with sand. So he went and got a bucket of sand from the sand pit, and they were all ready to kind of put this fire out if it got out of control. And it was, I mean, as you can see in the middle photo there, we got to light the fire, and I mean, I don't even think all the paper got to burn before they were there spraying it, putting it out, and putting the sand on top as well. So it was a lot of learning, I think, for all of us, and it was a really it felt really safe in the end, but it certainly, I think, risky business was not just for them, it was for me as well, and taking that emotional feedback from them as well to make that safe. So it was really great to see that they took on that responsibility of making sure things were safe. So I think the opportunity we give children, they do take that on board if we can give them space to do it. I think, Heather, what have we got?
Well, at this point, we were wondering how you're feeling right now. I think a lot of you are strong nature educators and you're feeling fine about the fire, but there are some things that come up in our practice that make us wonder and make us feel a little challenged. And this picture is some of the authors of the EKI guide, because we've used each other as a community of practice where we challenge each other's ideas and push each other forward to think in different ways. And Amanda, you had an example of this, a concept that Claire brought forward for you that made you really sort of be a little bit challenged and then take another step as educators. And so we're just plugging here for finding yourself a community of practice that you can, teachers that you can reflect with, or professionals that can help keep pushing you forward and pushing you to the next new thing or a different idea that you've never thought of. Do we need to ask how you're feeling, or do we just say, if you have strong feelings about something, reflect? Amanda?
Okay. So while we were writing the guide, we were all sharing. So if you go into the larger guide, we've got a 2-pager that I will try and put into the comments so you can download it, which just, it doesn't include the examples, but we wanted to make sure that there were some examples in there to give you a better idea of, I suppose, our thinking. They're just examples. You will probably come up with your own. And so while we were discussing the examples, this took a long time to make sure, because we all had to be happy with the examples that we were giving to highlight what the particular learning mode and concept were about. And so this one in particular, so this was Claire was, she was putting some ideas forward about learning with nature. And it was around the one about developing an awareness of the way that humans participants in the wider ecosystem. And so the example that she gave was engaging in expansive conversation and immersion in nature. And she said, such as, not othering nature as it. And I thought, so it kind of sat with me. And so I'm hoping that when you read through the guide, there are going to be some concepts there in your reading that are hopefully going to challenge you a little bit. And so I've got this little picture here. You know how children kind of carry, sometimes they pick up a stone and they'll carry it around with them all day. So I suppose a little nugget, I was carrying around this idea of what Claire had said, and it wasn't obviously, I was percolating on it. I was carrying it around. And then I was reading Braiding Sweetgrass, by Robin Ward Kimura, and it really resonated with me, with our Indigenous peoples in New Zealand. There are so many similarities with what I was reading in this book. And Robin, she talked about, I've got it here. she talked about how, I'm just going to get the wording here. No, it's gone. But something she said there really resonated with me and made me think, aha, this is about really similar to what Claire said around that we need to, using nature and using the words we and she and he. And I had been thinking around using, with my gender equity lens on my teaching, I had been using it a lot. You know, the stories that you read and a lot of the characters are he, and I wanted to make them more gender neutral, so I was changing them to it. When I was finding bugs in the garden, I wouldn't call them he or she, I was calling them it. And I suddenly realized that I was doing what Claire was kind of saying that we shouldn't be doing, which was othering nature as it. And so I was percolating on this idea, reading Robin's book. And so if I just go on to the next slide, Heather. And so I started to change the language that I was using. And I thought, well, if I want children to be using this sort of language, I need to model it myself. And so I started to use she when I was talking about, the rocks and the birds and he. And I found it really changed my connection to them just by changing that. My language really made a difference to that connection. So that's just one example. I think if you go on to the next slide as well, I found some other ways that I could do this that felt more comfortable with me. Now, in New Zealand, the Māori, we have gods, we call them atua, and so Tawhiri Mātia here is god of the wind, and we have Tangaroa, who is god of the sea. And so this enabled me to better use he when I was talking with children about the sea and the forest and what we were doing in it. So if you go to the next slide, Heather. So here we've got Tangaroa. So this gave me the opportunity to make those links back to Tangaroa. So children love to pick up the shells, etc., from the beach. And it was talking to them about, well, how many should we be taking? Is that okay? Will Tangaroa be all right with us taking these beautiful shells of his? And if we do take them, we do need to be saying thank you. And so bringing these ideas, it's a karakia. So we say a little thank you when we take the shells and the rocks and stuff away. So it's bringing that appreciation and acknowledging and that idea about being appreciative. And again, trying to get the children to think about this as a reciprocal relationship. So we are taking these things from Tangaroa. So what can we give back to him? And so that the children would then go and think about the rubbish that they could take away, trash, from the beach while we are down there on these visits. In the forest, we can pick up that rubbish as well and say thank you to Tane, God of the forest, as well. So just using those Indigenous ways of being that can really support that bringing nature into what we're doing with the children. Now, I've also got the story Taniwha. I've actually got the book here. And I found that books around Indigenous stories was another really good way of bringing that idea of for nature with the children. So this one here in particular, it starts off, so the Taniwha are supernatural beings, and they usually live near waterways. So they'll be in the lakes and the rivers and the sea, and they hide in deep pools and caves and dangerous waterways. So it's areas that people will often avoid. So the story starts, there's a Taniwha in my river. People say it's a log, but I know it's a Taniwha. The child then goes on a journey with the Taniwha, and they go and explore the sea, the air, the earth, and then they return with gifts from these different places. And the way it finishes is that it goes, I showed the gifts to my friend. He laughed. A stone, a feather and dirt, what rubbish. Then I showed them to my koro, which is this grandfather. He smiled and said, you have seen the faces of Tangaroa, god of the sea, Ranganui, the Sky Father, and Papatuanuku, the Earth Mother. How rich you are. So thinking about the different stories that you can use to bring these ideas into your program can be really helpful, especially if you're not confident bringing in some Indigenous ways of being. So you might want to think about the different stories that you perhaps have got in your bookcases that might be able to support this. I think in the next slide, Heather. We've got there. So these are just some of the books that I just love and love to share with the children as well. And so just thinking about what books that you might have that you find really useful for bringing in these ideas to share with children.
And a lot of times you'll have a burning book that you want to share with us. And so put it in the chat right now. Well, not a burning book, but something exciting for you that you want to bring forward.
That can help you bring up these ideas with children. Are they in? Liza's just put in a link. Oh, thank you. And I know that Megan, you're there, and there is also, is it the Blueberry Awards is another way of finding nature books. They do a review every year. It means that obviously children's book, but obviously there's a lot of books out there to support us as educators as well that can really support our understanding.
So we're going to finish our time together today with another story in an outdoor classroom. This is actually a Nature Explore classroom in an urban area. It's in Los Angeles. And we're hoping that you can find learning in, with, for, or about nature as you hear this story. And it's not too long. There's a child that has been described as being on the autism spectrum. And indoors, he was struggling quite a bit. You can see these pictures come from the pandemic. So they were spending, extra time in stressful situations, no matter what. We all were. And he discovered something in the outdoor space that he'd never seen before, because he doesn't have this kind of gentle grass and dirt near his home in the same way. And it was a pill bug, a roly-poly, some of us like to call them. And so these pill bugs became sort of an area of study, and the children decided they were going to build houses for these pill bugs, because when they got scared, they were noticing the pill bugs rolled up, and maybe they were unhappy. When they put them in their pockets, they rolled up. So they decided to protect the pill bugs and did this for quite a while and for a couple of days. And at some point, the pill bugs got, the houses got demolished by another group of children. And so they decided to use bigger and more robust materials to protect the roly-polies. Over time, children described the feelings that those pill bugs had. They took care of them in a very nurturing way, and were able to describe to others why it was important to protect them. And I like these pictures because it really does bring up that you don't have to have a forest or a manicured, natural, beautiful classroom space in order to bring forward these opportunities for children. Here they have small boxes of dirt, and then there's a small box of sand and some grass around them, and they were able to do some learning for nature. I mean, they were in nature, with nature, for nature, and they were learning about nature all at once. Can you see those things happening? Does that make sense to you? And we're really interested. We're kind of coming to the end of our time together. We're interested in some places or some questions that you might have, some comments or questions that you might have related to this guide and your experiences with children. So we're opening it up to you. Questions, considerations, stories. Unmute or put them in the chat. You can see Amanda's put the EKI outline there in the chat. Johanna?
One of the things about this environmental kinship guide is those of us that believe it, you're preaching to the choir here, it looks like, but one of the struggles that we experience is how to get families on board. They will yes you to death when you describe your philosophy, and that their children might get stung by a bee, or they might come home smelling funny, or be all muddy, or have worms in their pocket, to help them understand that the learning that is taking place. And I think this guide is something that would be a very simple thing to use in that situation. I think this would give us more ammunition, so to speak. But we are dealing now with children and parents of being isolated for COVID. And I think that is a really hard thing when we're putting them back in mud puddles and letting them climb trees, and 2-year-olds dealing with fire. So just my thought as I listened.
Thank you, Johanna. It's good to see you. Anyone else have some great ways that they could see using this guide to help communicate with parents? Or any other comments you'd like to make?
I guess I can imagine using it with coworkers, using it with your colleagues to bring them on board or help them sort of stretch their understanding or thinking, and then actually using it kind of as like a living document in the way you both described your writing team has done to kind of stretch your thinking around your teaching and working with children in this way.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Just giving you another second in case you want to unmute and share your experiences or any way that you might see using this guide. Patty says here in the chat, and this is really important to bring up both in the chat and out loud, that it's important to have good training in outdoor safety and first aid. Wild Med now has a course for outdoor schools. Cool, good resource, thank you. And Suzanne says, this is put into words what so many of us see and know. And that's what our hope was. We saw the incredible things you all are doing out in the field, and we wanted to find ways to highlight it so we could bring it forward to folks who don't know the stories, that don't know the value. And so this is one way that we thought might serve that purpose. And also to help you really see the incredible work that you're doing. And Lisa's put a link to Wild Med there in the chat. Thank you so much. If you're interested in, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, also, if you've got things that you think we've missed, or things that you think would be really helpful that we could add, would be really helpful, because we know we've focused a lot on children rather than the how. We've kind of done the why but not the how, because we leave that up to you. So it's like, are there other things that we can be doing to support you in that? So we're always open to new ideas.
And we are creating a community of practice that will look at this, use this guide to look at some of the concepts together. So if you're interested in being part of that, Amanda is setting that community of practice up. And your email is, Amanda?
Amanda@storypark.com.
Yeah.
You know, you're all really busy, so there's not, you can only do what you can do, and that is fantastic. Oh, thank you. Nice.
One thought that I just had reflecting is, do we slow down enough to give intentionality to learning about nature? And I think that's the hard thing, especially for adults who live in a drive-through culture, that we really have to take a deep breath and just have patience. And I think how to do that, you almost want adults to go through sit spots so that they fully experience it for themselves and then can use that knowledge to observe children and their wonder.
Yeah, so true. Well said, Johanna. I think we can grab a clue about slowing down from the natural world. And it could be by experiencing it ourselves or noticing the qualities in the natural world that are just at a slower pace. And so much of it is just a slower pace. Or just the right pace. Patty, go ahead.
Yes, and I think you alluded to this a few minutes ago, but some kind of a group where people could get together and talk. Sorry, take off my video here, put my video on. And I know that this is something that happened when COVID first started. I had an all outdoor nature school for 8 years up until the pandemic. And then, we were impacted by everything. And one of the things that happened was Natural Start and Aerofans and some of those other groups were having Zoom meetings so that you didn't have to feel so alone and overwhelmed with what was happening. And it's been it's been 3 years now for me, and I've been meeting with people locally about starting up again, creating a new program. I moved an hour and a half out of the city, but just having other people that I could get together with and just share ideas, share frustrations, share successes like we had during the pandemic, that would be really helpful if you're thinking about doing anything like that.
Great, Patty. Thank you.
Okay. And I do have to go. I have another appointment. Thank you so much.
Take good care of yourself. And as we close our time together, I just want to remind you of those purple asters and the yellow goldenrod in my wild natural backyard that I have here. And I hope that as you read this guide, the beauty in this work highlights the beauty in your work, and that you remember how incredibly rich the work you're doing is and incredibly important it is.
Thank you so much, Heather and Amanda, both of you, for sharing your time today and putting this resource together and out in the world. It's really beautiful and helpful. And this recording will go, I'll be sure to email everyone and get it out onto our YouTube channel.
Thank you for bringing it forward, Lisa.
Thank you so much for organizing.